he stopped me and he said, listen, love, we want good lawyers in this organisation. Leave the politics to us. Well, my name is Dina Yehia and I am a public defender. I've been a public defender for 11 years, which is basically a barrister doing defence work. I first came into contact with the Western Aboriginal Legal Service in 1989. That's when I was finishing my law degree, and it was at a stage where I was doing the College of Law placement. I'd always wanted to be a defence lawyer from about the age of 13. So all through university I was interested in working, once I'd finished, with the Aboriginal Legal Service. And I had a friend who also attended the University of New South Wales, Kevin Kitchener, Aboriginal law student, who had concluded his studies and was being admitted to the bar. And we were out celebrating his admission. And it was during the course of that I began to talk about my interest in working for Aboriginal Legal Service, and a friend of mine, Mark Austin, who you've just interviewed, suggested that I go out west and that I work with the Western Aboriginal Legal Service because there was nothing like it. I had never been west of Sydney. And I mean, I was born in Egypt. I came out here to Australia when I was 7, always lived in Sydney. So going out west was quite a foreign idea. But he spoke in such glowing terms about the work of the Western Aboriginal Legal Service and the people who were involved in that legal service that I remember he gave me the name of Eric Wilson, who was the principal solicitor at the time. And I remember in my semi-drunk state going to a payphone and ringing Eric Wilson and saying, you know, introducing myself and saying, I want to come out and work with you. The board of directors were interviewing for a position in December of '89, and I'll never forget it. I mean, that was my first profound memory of the Western Aboriginal Legal Service, because I was interviewed, we were all interviewed by all of the directors of the Western Aboriginal Legal Service, so 17 Aboriginal elders from all these towns in Western New South Wales, people, you know, really wonderful people like Tombo Winters, Steve Gordon, Maureen O'Donnell. There were 17 of them, plus the principal solicitor, who was Eric Wilson. It was an extraordinarily intimidating few minutes. Well, not few minutes, it was about half an hour interview. And each of the directors asked a question during this interview. And I remember Tombo Winters, who I came to respect immensely once I started working out there, asked me a question. I can't remember what it was exactly. It was something like, you know, why do you want to work for Wal? And I said, I think it's really important that everything that can be done for Aboriginal people be done, and politically we've let Aboriginal people down, etc. I was going off on this ruha. And he stopped me and he said, listen, love, we want good lawyers in this organisation. Leave the politics to us. And I mean, I remember it, and it was profound for me because I understood the importance from that moment about white people going out to an Aboriginal community to work as a solicitor. What people wanted in the community was good legal minds representing Aboriginal people who came before the courts. The politics was and should have been left to the Aboriginal people from those communities. At the time that I was working there, Noel Gillan was the coordinator. A wonderful woman by the name of Mary Ann Housier was the accountant office manager. She was a very large reason that I stayed out there for 7 years. There were a number of administrative staff who were wonderful. The solicitors at that time, Eric Wilson, as I say, was the principal solicitor, who was a marvellous mentor. and a number of other solicitors. At that time, I think there were about 5 or 6 of us in the Dubbo office. I remember also coming in for that interview into the office, and I remember wearing a pair of black tight-fitting ski pants and the top, and Mary Ann Housea, this woman that I speak so highly of, you know, I think she was in her late 40s at that time, really staunch Aboriginal woman. Anyway, she comes out and she says, "Come into my office." And she said, I think this was after the interview, and she said to me, "You want to work here?" "Yes." "If you want to work here, you don't go around looking like that. You don't go around wearing this. You know. You're going to get a lot of young men who will be your clients. And you're going to get a lot of those young men with Aboriginal wives and girlfriends. You want to get on in this community, don't go looking like that. Don't go dressing like that." And I thought, okay. And again, it was one of those brief conversations, right to the point, honest, straightforward, doing it for my own good. I took that advice. And as I say, I mean, I had 7 years at the Western Aboriginal Legal Service that were the best years, really professionally, of my life. And much of that was as a result of the connections that you made out there. So, and a lot of those connections were with those Aboriginal people who came from those communities. People like Mary Ann who looked after you and understood how difficult it was for young people coming out west who had removed themselves from their friends and their families, and who perhaps had not lived in the West before, and understood how important it was to provide those young lawyers with a sense of family. And that's what she and other people at the Western Aboriginal Legal Service did. The court work itself was quite difficult just because of the numbers of people you represented. Many of the matters, particularly in places like Burke and Brewarrina, were matters where Aboriginal people had been charged with assaulting police, resisting offensive language. It was in the days where you could get a jail sentence for swearing at police. And you would get to a place like Burke or Wilcannia and have, on a list day, and have, 50 people appearing in court, and you're 2 solicitors. And you would get the papers for these cases on the morning of court, and you'd have to get the papers, read them, absorb them, get instructions from your clients. And it was relentless. It was very difficult in many respects. The field officers that we had at the Western Aboriginal Legal Service were extraordinary. And I don't know that we could have done it without them. In my day, you'd have to get on the bus at midnight. I think it was about 11 o'clock or midnight. So you'd get on the coach so that you could travel to Broken Hill. And you get to Broken Hill, I don't know, it was about 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And Brian Hancock, the solicitor based in Broken Hill, who lived across the road from the bus station, would come and meet you with the list for the day and say, "Come across the road, get into your court clothes." So you'd go across the road, get into the court clothes, and then you'd go to court and you'd start your work. And then you'd travel to a place like Wilcannia that afternoon, so the next day you could attend court. And this is where the field officers were remarkable, because you'd get to Wilcannia that afternoon, and Davo, who was our field officer and who'd been the field officer at the Western Aboriginal Legal Service for 20 years before he left, would have the papers, and then he would bring the clients to the motel room where you would sit and interview them and take instructions from them, so you'd be ready for the next day. So there was this system where he'd drop off a load of people, they'd line up, wait to get instructions from them, and then he'd take a load home, and then he'd bring the next load. And that used to happen with him in a place like Wilcannia. And then of course there was the Burke and Brewarrina circuit, and Clancy McKellar from Burke would do the same thing. It was hard work, but it was also an incredible sense of family with the people with the field officers and with the people who ran the actual organisation. I have a recollection of when I first started going to the Amaroo Hotel, which is one of the cool hotels, at least it was then, in Dubbo, and a person came up to me and said, you know, you're new in town, yeah, white person, and what are you doing here? I started work with the Western Aboriginal Legal Service, you know, I'm a solicitor. And, why are you wanting to represent blackfellas for? And I thought, I never went back to the Amaroo Hotel. So really, the people who you wanted to be with were the people who you worked with. So the people you wanted to socialise with were people who you worked with. So it was this incredible sense of bonding that I've never had in any other job that I've done, or any other professional sort of organisation that I've worked for. And I mean, I left the Western Aboriginal Legal Service in 1996. I'm still a member of Mary Ann House's family, you know, so it's, what is it, 15 years later or whatever it's been. We're in constant contact. When they're in Sydney, they stay with me. When I'm in Dubbo, I stay with them. And those connections exist and have I mean, some of my the closest connections are the connections still that I made at that time. In my first year, in 1991, again, incredibly lucky to have started under the, in that period where Eric Wilson was the principal solicitor. He gave me the opportunity, knowing how much I enjoyed being in Burke and Brewarrina, he gave me the opportunity to instruct counsel in the deaths in custody inquiry where the Commission had come to Brewarrina to hold hearings in relation to the death in custody of Lloyd Boney. Yeah, so got to know the Boney family quite well, and it was a very important experience, sort of being involved in that hearing. I think it lasted for about a week. I think the Commission was sitting in Brewarrina for about a week. So that was incredibly important as well, just to see the ways in which the police operated at that time, and the focus on force as opposed to trying to connect with the community in a way that would be more constructive than simply charging people, and that revolving door of charging, imprisoning people, getting out, and it all happening again. So yes, I mean, there were those difficulties, but we managed, and to a large degree I think we managed because of the assistance that we had from the field officers, and we managed because there was this profound sense of belonging to a unit that meant that you just did whatever you had to do to get the work done. And if that meant getting on a bus at midnight, or if that meant sitting on the front steps of the Gilgandra courthouse, or if that meant sitting in your motel room in Wilcannia taking instructions on your single bed while your client sat across from you, it was hard, but you sort of did it.